Okay, dear students, so the continuation of the third part, which now we are in the fourth part of the linear human motions, and we are discussing about the dynamic stabilization. So, the you have understood about the importance of the increased momentum of the supraspinatus muscle among the rotator cuff muscles. Now, gravity also acts as a stabilizing synergist to the supraspinatus by offsetting, because now there is an increased rotatory force component of the supraspinatus that is counter stabilized or counter acted by the ITS force rotational force resultant component, but also the gravity also helps into offsetting the upward translatory pull, so as that we get a rotatory more movement or spinning over the head of the humerus over the glenoid fossa. Now we are going to the next muscle, which also has to play an important role in the uh, glenohumeral stabilization. That is the long head of biceps brachii. In the figure, you can see the long head of biceps brachii traveling upward direction, and then here from here we can see there is the whole tendon has a sheath, and here it has been shown in the figure, and then it enters to the groove, which is actually formed by the transverse humeral ligament. Actually, the tendon passes superior to the latissimus dorsi muscle, and then you because between the lateral and the medial lip of the humerus, and then enters. So you can see that the long head of biceps brachii runs superiorly from the anterior shaft of the humerus through the bicipital groove between the greater and lesser tubercles to attach to the supraglenoid tubercle and superior labrum. So it attaches to the not only to the tubercle. Yes, this is important thing you have to remember. The attachment is not only to the bony supraglenoid tubercle, also to the superior labrum of the the superior glenoid fossa. There is a labrum, right? And this labrum, superior part of that labrum, there is an attachment of the long head of the biceps. And then after that, it enters the glenoid humeral capsule through an opening between the supraspinatus and the subscapularis. All these muscles are intracapsular, so there is opening in between the supraspinatus tendon and the subscapular muscle tendon, where it penetrates the capsule that is a glenohumeral capsule. The biceps tendon, long head of biceps tendon, biceps brachii tendon, penetrates the glenohumeral capsule in the superior aspect of it, but not to the synovium. Within the bicipital groove, the biceps tendon is enveloped by a tendon sheath, which I already seen, and tethered there by the transverse humeral ligament that runs between the greater and lesser tubercles. The long head of the biceps brachii, because of its position at the superior capsule and its connections to structures of the rotator individual capsule, is sometimes considered to be the part of the reinforcing cuff of the glenohumeral joint. Whenever you read some of the journals and studies, you see some authors putting the long head of biceps along with the rotator cuff, muscles. And sometimes even clinically, when we see many findings, clinical findings, the orthopedic surgeons or the orthopedicians or even or also the physiotherapists, they try to put the long head of biceps along with the rotator cuff muscles. That actually shows the importance of the long head of biceps in the dynamic stabilization of the glenohumeral joint. The biceps muscle is capable of contributing to the force of flexion and can, if the humerus is laterally rotated, contribute to the force of abduction and anterior stabilization. Here, you have to understand, when we are studying regarding the physiology of muscles, the chapter, you have the third chapter, which we have studied about the muscles in this the joint structure and function, the textbook. You will understand that the muscles are classified in many ways. The muscle can be classified in chemically, biomechanically, structurally, histologically, and the physiological functionally. So in the function part, we divide the muscles according to the role: agonist, antagonist, synergist, rotator, fixator. Those kind of roles are there. The biceps muscle is the best example because the bicep muscle plays different roles in different orientation. So here again, continue repeating it. The biceps muscle is capable of contributing to the force of flexion in the elbow joint and can, if the humerus is laterally rotated, contribute to the force of abduction and anterior stabilization. So you can see that it can cause force of flexion on the shoulder joint as well as the elbow joint, as well as it can form the abduction. It can play a role of anterior stabilization for the force of abduction. So you have to see that in the shoulder it plays a role of stabilization during abduction. It can produce a flexion in the shoulder. It can produce flexion in the elbow joint. It can produce supination in the elbow joint. So the role of biceps is highly controversial. It has a major role to play in the upper limb. Although elbow and shoulder positions may influence its function, though that means that the position of the shoulder joint and elbow joint will dictate the terms of the role, on what role the biceps brachii muscle will play. The long head appears to contribute to glenohumeral stabilization by centering the head in the fossa by reducing vertical, that is superior inferior vertical translation, and anterior translations according to Pagani and colleagues. So Pagani hypothesizes that the long head may produce its effect by tightening the relative. So here, the earlier I have told you the anatomical orientation, it passes through the bicipital groove and under the transverse humeral ligament, and then passes through the joint and then penetrates the capsule. Between there is a opening between the supraspinatus and the infraspinatus muscle, and then it enters and then pierces the superior, attaches to the supraglenotubercle as well as to the superior labrum, and then pierces the glenohumeral capsule. So here what happens is the long head of biceps also has a role that it can tighten the loose superior labrum. So it can passively give a actively contracting and then creating a passive tension on the glenohumeral capsule, especially in the also to that area is the superior labrum is between the superior and middle glenohumeral ligaments. So already you know that the passive tension is produced by the rotator interval capsule, and superior glenohumeral ligament is part of the rotator interval capsule. So biceps tendon in a indirect way is also creating passive tension, actively contracting and creating a passive tension over the superior labrum. Studies show that injury to the anterior superior labrum did not affect any stability of the glenohumeral joint unless the attachment of the long head of biceps brachii was also disrupted. So here this statement is actually showing the importance of the long head of biceps. Studies show that whenever there is an injury in the superior labrum, even though there is a superior labral injury of the glenohumeral capsule, there is no symptoms or there is no pain or instability. That is only when the biceps tendon is long head of biceps tendon is intact. But it becomes symptomatic whenever the long head of biceps brachii was also disrupted. That means that it is to show the importance of long head of biceps brachii in the stability of the superior glenohumeral capsule or labrum. When there is rotator cuff tears, it is found that the biceps tendon hypertrophies. So this statement clearly shows that normally the rotator cuff tendons are the plays an important role, especially the supraspinatus along with the ITS plays important role in dynamic stabilization. But here this statement clearly shows us that whenever there is an injury to the supraspinatus or the rotator cuff muscles, the biceps tendon hypertrophies means that biceps tendon take over the role of the rotator cuff muscle. So we can call it as a secondary rotator cuff. Whenever the primary rotator cuff tendons are injured, the biceps, it is found that biceps tendon hypertrophy, mean that the biceps is contracting more or loaded more. That leads to hypertrophy. So that is what you have to understand. So that means that any patient coming to us with a supraspinatus tendinitis, if not taken care by us very well in the earlier stage, will go to hypertrophy of biceps tendon. Later it may go to plasticity of the plastic changes in the tendon, and then lead to injury of the biceps tendon also. And we often see the practicing physiotherapists often see such kind of cases if not been treated well with a good physiotherapist. Now we have come to the end of the dynamic stabilization of the glenohumeral joint. In a way, I can summarize. We all can summarize, and in one nutshell, we can say that the dynamic stabilization with all the above mentioned factors can be divided into 7 factors, which is very important to the stability, dynamic stability of the shoulder joint, which is a most mobile joint and more susceptible for injury because of its mobility. The factor one is the force of the prime movers or movers. The force of the prime movers or means important muscles such as the rotator cuff muscles, the deltoid, the biceps brachii, and the triceps brachii is very much important in the dynamic stability of the glenoid. The force of gravity is the second factor, which is very much important, which is always there. The force of the muscle stabilizers, the stabilizing muscle, which we already discussed, the static stabilizers and the dynamic stabilizers in each orientation we have already discussed. Articular surface geometry, here you have to remember the important thing is the articular surface geometry means the glenoid fossa, the head of the humerus, the acromion process, all this, how they are affecting the surface geometry is affecting the dynamic stabilization of glenohumeral joint. The fifth one is a passive capsular ligamentous forces, which is, just to remember this word, rotator interval capsule, which is playing the major role of the capsular ligamentous passive, which is passive because why we calling it passive, because it cannot contract and relax. It can only give passive tension like a rope. If there is a rope, if you give you pull the rope can transmit tension. If you leave the rope, the rope itself cannot create tension. Such kind of that you have already studied in the second chapter in the joint structure and function, and that is called as passive. The muscle, the contractile elements are not present in the capsular ligament structure, that's why we call it as passive. Sixth is the force which we cannot forget, which is the force of friction, or the umbrella term is the shear forces. Then you have the seventh one, the joint reaction force, because any shear force within the glenohumeral joint creates some friction. So why are we putting this? Because it is there. Friction force is there in the joint surface, because of all the forces compresses head in the glenoid fossa must be opposed by an equal force from the glenoid fossa in the opposite direction, that is joint reaction force. All these things we have studied in the first, second and third chapter. So I request all of my students to again go always read first, second and third, make it sure that you don't forget any part of that. So all the other chapters we are going to repeat the same thing, first, second and third chapters. All those principles are very, very important. Joint reaction forces can reach magnitude of 9 to 10 times of the weight of the upper extremity. Just imagine, whatever is the weight of the upper extremity of a person, that is upper limb, the joint reaction force can reach to 9 to 10 times of the weight of the upper extremity. So that means that the amount of friction or joint reaction force is going to transmit through the glenohumeral joint is going to be 10 times larger than the weight of the upper limb. When the medially directed forces have slightly superior or inferior components, shear forces are the result. Whenever there is a slightly superior, whenever the medially directed force, whenever there is a force being spread in 1 degree of motion, there is a possibility of shifting into another degree of motion. So this creates shear forces. And very important thing to not forget is the greatest shear forces during humeral elevation typically occurs between 30 to 60 degree of elevation. The painful arc is just starting from 60 degree